So I'm just gonna pray no one calls me or anything. I'm back to using my wire headphones, and I'm gonna do a few chapters of the Heir in a row. I don't know why I tell you these things. It's not like they're gonna come out in order. Anyway, chapter 6. 35 massive baskets sat in the office, filled with what must have been tens of thousands of entries, all left in their envelopes to protect the gentleman's anonymity. I tried to give off an air of eager anticipation for the sake of the camera, but I felt like I might vomit into one of the baskets at any given moment. That would be one way to narrow the pool. Dad placed a hand on my back. All right, Evelyn. Just walk to each basket and select an envelope. I'll hold them for you so your hands don't get full. Then we'll open them live tonight on the report. It's that easy. For something so simple, it seemed incredibly daunting. Then again, I'd felt overwhelmed since we announced the selection, so this shouldn't have been a surprise. I adjusted my favorite tiara and smoothed out my iridescent gray dress. I wanted to make sure I looked positively radiant today. And when I checked my reflection before heading downstairs, even I was a little intimidated by the girl in the mirror. So I literally select each one myself? I whispered, hoping the cameras weren't watching too closely. He gave me a tiny smile and spoke softly. It's a privilege I never had. Go ahead, love. What do you mean? Later. Go on now. He gestured toward the piles and piles of entries. I took a deep breath. I could do this. No matter what people were hoping for, I had a plan, and it was foolproof. I would walk away from this unscathed. Just a few months of my life, nothing in the grand scheme of things, and then I'd go back to the work of becoming queen, alone. So why are you stalling? Shut up. I walked to the first basket with a label declaring the contestants were all from Claremont. I pulled one from the side. Cameras flashed. Cameras flashed, and the handful of people in the room actually applauded. Mom wrapped her arms around Aaron in excitement, and he sneakily made... Oh, that's 2 pages. Okay. And he sneakily made a face at me. Miss Marley sighed with delight, but Miss Lucy was absent. Austin was missing too, which was no surprise, but Cade, K-A-D-E-N, Caden, okay. But Caden stood by, observing the whole thing with interest. I used different techniques for different bins. On one, I plucked the envelope from the top. On the next, I buried my arm to fish out my choice. The onlooker seemed incredibly amused when I got to Carolina, Mom's home province, picked up 2 envelopes and weighed them in my hands for a few seconds before dropping one back in. I placed the last entry in Dad's hands, and there was more clapping and camera flashes. I gave what I hoped was an enthusiastic smile before the reporters all exited the room, off to give their exclusive stories. Erin and Caden left, joking as they went, and Mom gave me a quick kiss on the head before she followed them. We were speaking again, but didn't have much to say. "You did marvelously," Dad said once we were alone, a genuine tone of awe in his voice. "Really, I understand how nerve-wracking this can feel, but you were wonderful." "How do you know, though?" I placed my hands on my hips. "If you didn't pick out entries yourself." He swallowed. You've heard the broad strokes of how your mother and I found each other, but there are tiny details that are best left in the drawer. The only reason I am telling you this is because I think it will help you to see how fortunate you are." I nodded, not sure where he was going. He took a breath. "My selection wasn't a farce, but it wasn't that far off. My father chose all the contestants by hand, picking young women with political alliances, influential families, or enough charm to make the entire country worship the ground they walked on. He knew he had to make it varied enough to seem legit. So there were 3 fives thrown into the mix, but nothing below that. The fives were meant to be little more than throwaways, to keep anyone from being suspicious." I realized my mouth was gaping open and shut it immediately. "Mom?" Was meant to be gone almost immediately. Truth be told, she barely made it past my father's attempts to sway my opinion or remove her himself. And look at her now." His whole face changed. "Though it was hard for me to imagine, she is even more beloved as queen than my mother. She has made 4 beautiful, intelligent, strong children, and she has been the source of every happiness in my life." He flipped daily through the envelopes. No, sorry, I missed a dot. He flipped idly through the envelopes in his hands. "I'm not sure if fate or destiny is real, but I can tell you that sometimes the very thing you've been hoping for will walk through the door, determined to fend you off, and still somehow you will find that you are enough." Until then, I'd never had a reason to doubt that I'd seen the whole picture of my parents' love story. But between Dad's confession that Mom wasn't even supposed to be a choice, and Mom's revelation that she didn't want to be a part of the choosing in the first place, I wondered how they had managed to find each other at all. It was clear from Dad's expression. He could barely believe it himself. "You're going to do great, you know," he said, beaming proudly. "What makes you think so?" "You're like your mother, and my mother too. You're determined, and perhaps most important, you don't like to fail. I know this will all work out, if only because you refuse to allow it to go any other way." I nearly confessed I had come up with pages of ideas to drive these boys away, because he was right. I didn't want to fail, but for me, failure meant having my life led by someone else. I'm sure everything will turn out just as it should," I said. a whisper of regret hanging in my voice. He lifted a hand and placed it on my cheek. It usually does.